Yes, welcome to the dialogue this morning. I've been joined by Honorable Mugole Mauku David Stephen. He is a trade unionist and member of parliament for Kabweri County. Welcome to the dialogue once again, Honorable.
Thank you very much, our viewers and those listening to us for this very wonderful topic or topics that you've introduced. I greet my people of Kabweri and Kibuku district, where government has selected to launch the parish development model, and I will be one of the host members of parliament for this event in the country, and so all eyes and movements will be tuned to Kibuku.
Yes.
And I thank them once again for electing me to come to Parliament, where I'm continuing to put views forward for them, and also the trade unionists whom I have served for over 30 years. I'm happy that I'm here to discuss this particular topic.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure hosting you, Honorable Stephen. And we didn't tell our viewers that you are a member of the National Resistance Movement, the ruling government. Good. Henry Muguzi, the founder and executive director, Alliance for Campaign Finance Monitoring. And this is a civil society organization that tracks the integrity of governance systems in Uganda, especially tracking money in politics. It's a pleasure once again hosting you on the dialogue, Henry.
Thank you, Prince. Viewers of Salt TV, it's a pleasure for me to be here. But also, you know, those that have managed to go through the week, despite the difficulties, I think it's now recovery time after sending children back to school. I welcome you, and it's an honor. And I hope what we're going to discuss here would make a contribution towards building our country.
Good. Well, once again, we welcome you to the dialogue, our viewers. And like I said in my introductory remarks, the 36 years of NRM now will be put into context, and again the passing of an icon, Honorable Professor Emmanuel Tumsime Mutebire. 20 years he has been at the helm of the central bank. He is credited for doing his best to shape and modernize Uganda's economy, and at personal level he is extolled as an honest bureaucrat and a man who did his best to see that the economy of this country remains afloat. He passes at a critical moment, like you said, at a time of recovery, and we wonder what effect that could be to the economy of this country. I'll start with Honorable Mugole Stephen. Professor Emmanuel Mutebire, he died in a hospital in Nairobi on Saturday morning. But again, he was in Parliament on Thursday. Parliament paid tribute to his distinguished service. And even yesterday at Kololo Independence Grounds, the nation mourned the passing of this icon. Speak about Mutebire.
Thank you, and I'll speak about Professor Mutebire in two aspects. I know some little of his social life because of the services I've been in, but majorly on what he has been doing for this country. This is an astute economist, and truly, who served this country with diligence, and was working almost throughout his time, and he has served public service from, I think, Amin's regime. And
he fled and went into exile during Amin days.
I'm now talking of when he started his service. He has done a great job for this nation. You remember, in fact, he was very good in what we call managing thin situations, thin management system. That's why he was called Mr. Fix-It. And he carried his culture of being a true Muchiga. Where it was a no, he would say no. Even the president yesterday had to agree in regard to this particular aspect that he enjoyed the war between him and the professor in regard to debate. And he said really it is important that somebody should just not say yes, yes, as long as this is an intellectual debate. Professor Mutebire was there. He likened Professor Mutebire also to Dr. Suruma, who is also a Mchiga. And I think we should liken the Machiga for them what is not, they always say no. And I think that is a good culture, not to beat about the bush. So we had economic shocks, several. You remember when the whole world went into recession, and even developed nations. I remember that time I was in Cyprus.
2009?
Yeah, I was in Cyprus, and I found Cyprus really collapsing. And it was in the Eurozone. Even here, our inflationary gap went up to 33%. But he managed to fix this problem. He has kept the inflationary gap not growing. In fact, we ran between 3.6 to 5.4 year in, year out. That is important.
True.
It has kept the currency a little stable. Sometimes even bring down the dollar rate. Whereas we have advantages and disadvantages of having a strong currency. But at least there has been stability. That the dollar rate has been in the range of 3,500 to 3,600 for a period beyond 5 years. So that is stability. He managed to do this. That is why tributes are really paid to him, and the number of years he has taken in that position. Both experience, but also the trust, honesty, ethics, and integrity at the job. That is why the other day when one of our commissioners was trying to introduce something on the floor of Parliament, we thought, most of us, that was an abuse to
his legacy.
The legacy of a professor, the legacy of somebody who was planning for the economy, and who, by law, there is nobody who is protected, I think, in the law like a Governor Bank of Uganda. Somebody who is the chief executive, but again is still the chairman of the board. So you see, and the law is even very specific that the person of a governor of Bank of Uganda should not have any financial distress. That is why he was the most highly paid public servant in the country. And you could not demean his name. Whereas somebody was trying to put it in good faith, I think, like the Baganda say, I suppose that the widow mentioning such a thing, that could be something which we shouldn't have to talk about. But I know of the president, every widow of such a high stature person, they receive the hand of the president. Number one. Number two, if you knew the gratuity of the person of a governor of Bank of Uganda, it can buy several houses.
True.
And even to say that the professor does not have property, that is also not correct. He may not have property in Kampala because he was a planner.
Yeah.
You know, all retirement, you leave the city and go back home. So he has property, a lot of property in Kabale, where he wanted to go, and that's after retiring. So unless the widow doesn't want to go and stay in Kabale, the gratuity can pay for him a house.
Yeah,
the
true.
role of us parliament is to legislate and appropriate, and we have legislated for Bank of Uganda. And when such a person passes on, you cannot come to public to demean. I just wanted to mention that, because so that we don't go back to that debate. I know you'll be coming there. Yeah, but that one, at least I can assure you that that's why even the Prime Minister came in quick to say no, as government.
We'll look into the matter.
Into it, and, because it was not a parliamentary matter, I can assure you. We were not comfortable with it when it was raised. Because we know this is a man, our role was to eulogize about him on the things he has done for this country, not to demean his...
So Honorable Stephen, the eulogies and tributes coming in are not a matter of formality and tradition that when a person dies, we speak good of him. This is about a person, a gentleman, who gave it all for his country.
Who was voted the best governor on this continent. What does that mean? Is it Uganda which voted? Uganda didn't vote, did not participate in the voting. So that shows the type of person we are talking about. Even in his public life, his statements, you hear even what the president is speaking about. He could even say no to the president in a particular aspect. And he gives reasons as to why he has said no.
Okay, thank you so much.
So
thank you, Honorable. Let me cross over to Henry. Henry, your job is to track the integrity of these leaders, and especially in how money flows and moves around. You must have a very astute clue about the legacy of this gentleman.
Thank you, Prince. You see, it's such a difficult job to speak about a man of the stature of the late Professor Mutebire, whom I have always referred to as a colossus in the macroeconomics, but also a patriot.
Really?
If you look at what he did when he was Yield President at Makerere University, the capacity and ability to speak truth to power in the presence of a dictator such as Idi Amin at such a young level tells you how patriotic he was. So he combined the astuteness in macroeconomics with patriotism. We do not have many public servants that are of his stature. I want to tell you that when the NRM government comes to power in 1986, of course they inherited a very shambolic economy. For some of us who were living then, we remember my father would always complain prices were rising every day. So there was no certainty. So it took Mr. Museveni about 4 years to figure out the economy. I remember he started by appointing professors, one of them from Makerere, one of them Professor Chesimila, but this did not help. Academics did not help. I think it was until around the 1990s, 90 there, when a young professional, a team of young professionals, I think the Minister of Finance, after the president had failed, and decided to consult them, that Mutebire steps forward. If you're looking for his most productive years, were the years between 1990 and 2005, the mid-2000s. Those were years when the regime gave space to the technocracy in the Ministry of Finance and Bank of Uganda to steer the economy. Yes. That is where Prof Mutebire excelled.
During restructuring and...
So all those interventions, the restructuring, the structured adjustment programs, you know, all those things, for him to be, let me say this, because of his character as a man who would say it as it is, that's one of the reasons he became a darling of the Bretton Woods sisters, World Bank, IMF, and so on, because he's one man who would say it as it is without fear. So that's when he excelled in his ingenuity in developing solutions that helped the economy recover. From the mid-2000s onwards, politics took over. Voters started to matter. My voters, that's when president started. Before 2005, programs that would not necessarily yield anything would not be accepted. But after 2005 and subsequently, when politics takes over, my voters have to be appeased, we have to stay in government, we have to survive, regime survival issues start cropping in. Of course, he then becomes Bank of Uganda, he leaves the position of PSST, then goes to become governor. But even then, he tried. Now, we remember him in 2011, 2012, 2013 there. He came out and confessed. I remember when he came out, he was reported to have said that he was misled into financing elections. Yeah. And he also promised Ugandans it will never happen again. You see, it takes a character for you to say that was a mistake. I'm sorry I made it, but I will not repeat it.
Especially if you are African.
Not many. Especially not many Ugandans can do that. So we really applaud him for that. We know that he's been, in the latter years, I think the last 10 years have been difficult for him as governor. Because you see, as governor of Bank of Uganda is a macroeconomic institution. And therefore you have to work on those very unpopular fiscal interventions that would help the economy steer forward. But also at the same time, you are also just a bank. You are a banker of government. You see, so if I am government, you are my banker. So I'm your client. So when I say pay Apollo, you should oblige. So I think he found himself in situations where he's a macroeconomic institution who must say no, but when the owner of the money says pay Basajabalaba, then his hands are tied. So I think you would see some of those things that he did grudgingly, which he would not have done. But overall, I think we have lost a person we can never replace. And we cannot replace him because he was brought up in the circumstances that shaped his character. Those circumstances are no longer there. So I don't know, we have lost a colossus.
Wow. Thank you so much, Henry, and thank you again, our viewers. Honorable Stephen, before we look at the criticism that has come along the way in these 20 years when Professor Mutebire was governor, look back at the years of structural adjustment programs. And partly that is attributed to foreign policies and all that. Speak about it, because that can bring out the history. And though Mutebire was not in charge, but again he was part of this system. And
he was PSST.
He was in a key.
He was part of that team.
Yeah, part of that team.
The tank team in
that implemented those policies. Briefly.
Yeah, I was a very young man during that divestiture program,
which we still think it was a mistake.
Something called it DRIC, divestiture structure something, and then generally called structure adjustment program. And this was a push. It was not a pull. It was a push from IMF and World Bank. Because you know, when President Museveni came in 1986, finding an economy which was in shambles, He had started with even with barter trade. You remember that you give me, I give you beans, I do this, and until because he was now touching everywhere to see if anything can come. Until this think tank came in, where Professor Mutebire was part of the think tank, and they agreed on the structured adjustment programs. I can say it revived the economy.
Really?
It revived the economy. The structured adjustment, because we could not, business could not be in hands of government. This revived the economy. There are some criticism, yes, and I can critique also, because I think we should be given time to do the criticism on the other side. But on the average, the structured adjustment programs push the economy of this country to almost 80% of what it used to be the other time. I can give examples. Industries, most industries which were under government could not make any money. We had the coffee marketing board, where people could, we had too much coffee, but somebody brings in 2 trailers and they record that he has brought 10 trailers supplying the air. These things, when they came into the private hands, at least you saw privatization helped. So that think tank and him being at the helm of the thinking, with having astute knowledge in the area, that type of exposure assisted this country come out from the economic limbo to where we are. You can imagine, even in the East African region, this is the country which has been troubled the most. Kenya has never fought. Tanzania has never fought. But if you find our economy also relating, going near them, we are interlocked. We are not on. That's why we are struggling with all these things, oil refinery, oil prices, whatever. Our committee, I sit on the Committee of Trade, Tourism and Industry, and we have been trying to investigate this issue of fuel prices. The issue is because we are interlocked. You can only access fuel through the OTS, open tender system, and which is controlled by Kenya. And we have serious issues because we are interlocked. But these structured adjustment programs help us as a country to come out from that, and we are a private sector-led economy. Today, a private sector-led economy. Though now we are coming to have programs of PPP, public-private partnership, they are very important. We have areas where I don't agree at all that government should privatize, where the forces of supply and demand should work. I don't agree in some of the areas. And in our 36 years of NRM, those are some of the critiques as an NRM legislator would try to put on the floor. You cannot liberalize life. Health. You can't liberalize health. Whereas I have the private investors in this, it must be under a public-private partnership. Because it's a basic need. So I don't have to, and it's a right to health. So there is something we shall be talking about later. What have we not done in 36 years? But as far as the structured adjustment programs, which were led by the fallen professor, we have jumped the hurdle.
Good. Henry, though we agree that these policies were imposed on us by the Margaret Thatchers and everyone, these technical people in government and who are at the helm of managing the economy, I think they were also responsible in one or another of either the consequences of those policies or the credits that came with those policies.
Thank you very much, Apple, and I'm happy we are talking about this because you see, as much as I work with the civil society, I'm also a scholar, so I invest most of my time in research and publishing. So the structure, if you look at the departed Professor Mutebire, his upbringing, because when he leaves Makerere, he goes to the UK. He gets opportunity to study at Oxford University, and he's exposed to capitalism. So when he returns back to find an economy that was controlled by government, but he had seen free market economy there. So I remember when you research, they tell you that in that meeting when the President Museveni was asking for answers from technocrats, when Mutebire steps forward as the only man who you know, of course, he's the one who speaks truth to power, and advises, let's open up the economy. I think he's reflecting on what he had seen working there. And one of the things that make him a darling of those Bretton Woods sisters is because when he says, let's open up the economy, then his thinking tied in with the thinking of the IMF. And then they said, oh, this is the person to fly with. That's why he starts becoming a darling. But opening up the economy was one of the best things. Because even if you look around today, the countries in Eastern Europe that were former part of colonies of states of Russia, they also struggled until they opened up the economy.
Those socialist economies.
Mwalimu Nyerere had stuck to his ujama until he reached a time and said, I apologize to Tanzania, I have misled you. My socialist policies won't work. You need to go to capitalism. In other words, open up the economy. The problem they did in Uganda is that when they went to open up the economy, instead of opening the door, they actually ripped off out the door. Open. So all hell broke loose. I should also emphasize this, that we speak about corruption. The government of NRM inherited corruption. You see, at the time of Obote II, there was a gang of mafias that were, some of them were appended to the office of the First Lady because she comes from Buganda. And these were Baganda, wise men, that were in the business of supplying air. You know, they issue invoices for nothing done, and they were very rich around the country.
Really?
Yes. One of them was my brother, but he's also now left, gone. So he inherits corruption. The technocracy itself is corrupt. So I think at the time of privatization, the technocracy that was corrupt already sensed an opportunity.
An opportunity.
And this is where, if you're tracing the genealogy, or if you like the source and origin of the mafiaism we're talking about today, that's where the seeds of the mafia we are talking about today were sown in the privatization process. Sure. Because then grabbing, people went large-scale grabbing. They shouldn't have privatized sectors such as health. They shouldn't have privatized sectors such as education, because that's what the government has to do. But they overdid it. So privatization, I want to argue, was a good thing. Opening up the economy was a good thing, if only they had done it wisely. But because now they became excited and ripped all the door out, we are suffering the consequences.
Much as Professor Mutebire shares the credit for whatever went right during his time and all those times when he was still the PSST Minister of Finance, during the structured adjustment programs and all those policies.
Yes.
Should we also blame him partly for what you're talking about?
Absolutely, because look, when they privatized it, especially for me, I really hold him accountable for ensuring that there is no local bank that remains alive. Because under his tutelage, under his supervision, you see they closed what? They closed International Community Bank,
Global Trust,
Cooperative Bank,
even Greenland
Commercial Bank, Greenland. You see, it doesn't always follow that when someone makes a mistake, the punishment is closure. Or the way you deal with it is to punish. Sometimes the way you deal with it is to help. Learn from the mistakes and move forward. Are you going to shoot everybody that wrongs you? Are you going to put into jail everybody that commits a felony? How big? What is the size of the jails you have? So I think some of these banks should have been helped to clean up their act. But there, it's like they had on the one solution, close. That we don't agree. That we don't agree. But the other thing also we need to look at is, I think, allowing the government in power to have a free reign on public resources around campaign time was also not a good thing, because that always brought about instability in the economy. You will notice, if you go to research, that every time Uganda completes an election, the GDP dips all the time, from 6 to half to 3. You see, why does that happen? So I think he failed to guide. Yes, we understand the pressures he faced from the regime, because the regime needed the money, but also that even in the latter stages, the only bank we had left that would do, quote unquote, we would call indigenous Crane Bank. Again, they closed it. So I think until we get back, until we go back to the drawing board and start working towards encouraging local banks, because at the moment all the monies that these banks make are repatriated. So what do we stay with as a country? So if these are some of the things we need to reflect upon.
Well, viewers, the program is The Dialogue. My name is Simapolo, and we are looking at the legacy of Professor Emmanuel Mutebire, the governor of Bank of Uganda for the last 20 years. He died, and eulogies and tributes are still flowing in, extolling him as an exceptional economist who did his best for his country. And all that said, criticism also is all over. So we look on both sides of the coin. And Honorable Stephen, is it true what Muguzi Henry said about Mutebire, especially on the issue of closing banks that were closed, and allowing the powers that be in power to have a leeway on funding, especially during election time?
You see, 2 or 3 things, but number one is, first of all, I agree with him, because you remember what I had said. I was a small boy working at Shelton by then when these structural adjustment programs were on, and I was on the committee leading workers to discuss with them on terms and conditions of service of people in the hotel sector, those hotels that were under government that were being taken over by private individuals, because I was a young workers leader at that time. And like he has said, excitement caused the government to open up openly and left certainly and even opened up basic needs of a person. That is education, that is health. Imagine they had even gone to water.
Even transport.
Even transport.
Yeah, transport is still in the private sector.
So you see, there is a problem. So there are certain areas.
Even communication.
Yeah, where they had to leave part of the things to government. Even if they were to bring in a private investor in terms of putting in money, then that person would have either 49%, but the biggest shareholder should have been government on those basic needs. So there was a minus in that area. And then protecting the indigenous Ugandan who has come into a sector, more so in the banking sector, where our professor was the governor. Despite all the eulogies and the very good things he did, I think even himself recently, he said, I think we made a mistake to close Grain Bank. And the government is losing this case, even for Grain Bank, I suppose. And they have lost it to all other courts, whether they're going to Supreme Court or whatever.
They appealed, I think, once or twice.
In quotes, you could think, say, Grain Bank is for a foreigner, but that is a Ugandan foreigner who is indigenous here. Whatever money he makes, he builds hotels, he does what? He has over 3,000 workers. So that was, he forgot that area in the economics. That that you have to protect the indigenous Uganda.
Indigenous investors.
He closed a bank for his brothers. It was National Bank of Commerce. He closed.
Actually, he was a shareholder in that bank.
A shareholder, you see, because you see, being a hardliner is good, but everything extreme is not. So that extremism in hardlining on a matter because of being an icon in credibility, in sometimes skills. Just like my brother said, some of these banks needed guidance. They needed guidance. I saw Greenland Bank, I think by then he was not the governor. I wonder whether he was not a governor.
He was wait a second, he was governor.
No, he was governor.
He was governor.
I remember this statement. He comes out, that time I was working in the media, I was a journalist. But this statement he uttered. He said, the closure of a few local banks does not constitute a crisis. There is no crisis here. I remember that.
And I can say that was wrong. They needed guidance. There is one thing Greenland Bank brought in this country, working up to 5 p.m.
Oh, yeah.
Banks used to close at 2. It is a local bank which started saying, no, why should we close at 2? There was a fight. You fight with the security.
Transform the culture of banking.
Enter. So the culture of banking was brought up by Greenland Bank. It could be excused, whatever. We had the Basaja Balabas with a lot of mistakes, but they could be excused to try them. And among all, he failed in a number of businesses. At least the Kampala University, we are now having a number of doctors coming from Kampala
International University.
And very, very good lawyers. I mean, very, very good doctors.
So the one of Greenland Bank was Kampala University.
Yeah, and the one of Greenland Bank was Kampala University. So this is an area where he should have closed an eye.
Could he have done something before his death, especially on that sector of banking, the banking sector?
Yeah, that one he should have.
In his mandate, has he powers to do something different from what we have? I mean, supporting these local banks, because now the banking sector is dominated by foreigners.
You're surprised now. He has to remobilize because all the investors and the shareholding was demobilized. So remobilizing is very difficult. I think he didn't have enough power.
Yeah. So Barclays Bank, Stanbic, Standard Chartered, all the money that's repatriated. Do you see properties here of Standard Chartered or Stanbic or Barclays? Nothing.
Even Bank of Africa.
But it is
which was once TFA.
Our indigenous banks. Kampala University came because there was Greenland Bank. Kampala International, I mean, all of these hotels, water, Sudir, very many properties are coming in. He had Green Bank. You close it under mysterious whatever. But
talk about Uganda Commercial Bank.
Uganda Commercial Bank.
UCB.
UCB. Now where is it? Uganda Cooperative Bank.
Now we are talking about Uganda Development Bank.
Yes.
UDB. Now that's what we are talking about.
Yeah. Which UDB accessibility of funds.
So they privatized the Uganda Commercial Bank. The properties of Uganda Commercial Bank that were littered across the country were grabbed by mafias.
I can tell you, UDB here, we have, government has put billions of money in UDB. Accessing money in UDB is a miracle.
Well, Mr. Muguzi, in just 2 minutes, because we need to go for a break.
Okay.
Wind up on that issue of banks and we go for a break. When we return, then we'll briefly talk about what Honorable Stephen raised, his personality and the issues that even came to Parliament about how the family may become homeless. We'll make a comment on that.
Yeah, but you see, you cannot have a country, a government, which keeps money in the banks owned by foreigners. You cannot do that. So I think the starting point would have been, can you, okay, maybe you would have closed the others. But can we protect Uganda Commercial Bank? That all the government institutions have an indigenous bank where they keep what? Okay, now, and you wonder, if you had been the PSST and now you're governor, you are faced with the situation of Uganda Commercial Bank. Couldn't that have been the only bank you should have protected? In view of what we've just said, I think some of these things were mistakes, and I like that he always comes back and says, I apologize.
Which is a very rare virtue.
Which is a very rare virtue in the Africans. So I think when it comes to the banking sector, that was mismanaged. They would have done it better, and he should have seen it. He should have done better. We don't know under whose orders or influence he was working, but it was a wrong thing to get. And to get those local banks back will take a lot, because now they demobilized the Ugandans. So that crop of local investors that was thinking banks is gone.
Yeah.
The crop of local investors you have today is thinking
now we're looking at arcades and supermarkets.
So for it now to grow and groom that crop of local investors that would think banking industry would take decades.
To take decades.
Yes.
The program is the dialogue. We have Mr. Henry Muguzi, the executive director and founder, ACFIM. ACFIM is Alliance for Campaign Finance Monitoring, a civil society organization that tracks the integrity of governance systems in this country, especially in tracking money in politics.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And Honorable Stephen Mugole Mauku David Stephen is the Member of Parliament for Kabwiri County, a member of the National Resistance Movement, but he is a trade unionist. We are looking at the legacy of Professor Emmanuel Mutebire. When we return, we'll look at the sentiments about his decision not to have a home in Kampala, and now it is in Parliament, it is now in public discourse. How some people now say it is denting his good legacy. We return with that and much more on the dialogue.
Soul Television.
The break. My name is Simapolo. We have Honorable Mugole Mauku David Stephen, the Member of Parliament for Kabwiri County, and we have Mr. Henry Muguzi, the Executive Director and Founder, ACFIM, Alliance for Campaign Finance Monitoring, and we are looking at the legacy of Professor Emmanuel Tumsime Mutebire. He survived with a widow, Betty Mutebire, and one child, Duncan Tumsime, and it was in Parliament just on Thursday. An issue was raised and alleging that now that the professor has passed on, the family could be homeless. They've been living in an official residence, and after all this, the widow fears that probably when she is evicted, she may be homeless just because the professor did not build a house in Kampala. But what we know, and for sure, the professor had planned very well. He has a home somewhere in his home village. Honorable, should it really have been an issue to come to Parliament in the first place?
In fact, it shouldn't. It should have not crossed Parliament when we were realizing the passing on of an icon, to make a statement that would demean that the person who has been planning for this country for almost 30 years, he did not plan well. He planned so well. The Bible says, let man live for 70 years. But for those who are strong, can go up to 80. And Mutebire has passed on at the age of 72. So he has passed the pass mark of God. He lived to that age. And as a good plan, like they say, east-west, home is best. he had reached his retirement time. He had even requested that he should retire. But because the president saw that he had no person to fix at that time, Professor Mutebire continued working. So he planned well that when I retire, either by death, because that's not retirement, because when you retire by death, you still go back to where you were born. Either retire by end of contract or resignation, name it, I will go back to Kabale. And I'm very certain that he prepared so well in Kabale. In fact, if people were to wake up, if Professor Mutebire stands up now and he hears the person who brings such a matter into the public domain, he would strangle him.
Really?
He would strangle him because he knows what he did is the best. After the working in Kampala for all those decades, you need to go off the streets of Kampala. Go back home. He has an island. Lake Bunyonyi, this is the third deepest lake in the world. That is a
it's a tourism site.
And that is a life of a retired person. One time I was visiting, was in Bridlington in London. It is at the lakeside. You will find that most of the aged are in that area. When you grow, you have to leave the city. So I do not know who mentioned that and how when it came to Parliament, we did agree, and I am saying the Prime Minister came quickly to say, no, we shall handle this as government. But I'm 100% sure that Professor Mutebire planned well. Not every rich person must have property in Kampala.
Could that issue have come up as with sinister motives? What could it? How could it?
I don't want to. Somebody could have brought it in good faith, following what the widow said, but maybe the widow could have been used. But I don't think that the widow did not understand the intentions of the husband, because I'm sure they have been discussed.
They have lived for all these years together.
If the widow wants to remain in Kampala, the gratuity of the husband is enough to buy houses in Kampala, if he wants to remain in Kampala. But the professor we are talking about is so well established with the farms, with a number of properties, but outside Kampala. And that's what, by the way, I would advise. So I dismissed. I would advise every person, when you get to your retirement age, Kampala should not be your area. Go to the lakeside, go to the countryside. You are going to have. That's why everybody at 56, you are looking for a farm. You are doing, because that is the life now. You will be fitting in. When you come to Kampala, this, if you had not died, is somebody who is first. I said the law says a person of a governor of Bank of Uganda should not have any financial distress.
Wow.
Should not have any financial distress. That puts me to even his social life. I was his waiter at Sheraton, something like 25 years ago. And his drink was Black Label. We had even to put at Sheraton a reorder level at whatever circumstance there must be a Black Label bottle which is sealed, because you would not take a whiskey which, unless he has seen you breaking
the
seal, and he would empty that bottle. In fact, he was very strong, both in the brain and health-wise. Though I'm not a health profession, but I would imagine that that Black Label could cause some effects.
The liver.
Yeah, to the liver. Because he would finish the whole bottle. But he would not stagger to show that he had a very strong brain and health-wise. He would not. Recently, I'm told in the recent years, he had migrated from Black Label to Blue Label. That's John Walker Blue Label. It just came around 15 years to the market of Uganda. And but you see, the liver to contain that. This is a man who would have even lived for 90 years.
Wow.
I'm sure the 10 years of ailing one of the the causes could have been that. But it was so social. Whenever we would come at Sheraton, almost all people around him would not allow them to pay any bill. He would pay those bills. And the waiters, supervisors, by the time I left Sheraton in the managerial position, he would call me and say how many people have been on duty today in his area. And we would tip.
Wow.
Everybody. So everybody would be happy when the professor has arrived. So that's what I'm going to say. He did not want anything that could rebuke him in public. So what was happening really was a rebuke to his person.
Wow.
He couldn't accept that.
Henry, a man extolled as generous, as down to earth. Now an issue comes up at the last hour and seems to now dent that huge legacy.
Thank you, Apollo. You see, we remember one of the greatest leaders the world has ever seen. His name is Alexander the Great. He is one of the most formidable leaders that Greece ever produced. Alexander the Great left in his will, but he also cautioned those that would stay around after he was demised. He said, when I die, in my coffin, make sure that you carry me around the whole city. But in that coffin, I want my hands to be hanging out, and also my legs. so that the world can know that to this world I came with nothing.
I'm going with nothing.
And with nothing, I am leaving this world. Do that. If you do that, that will be my legacy. Countrymen, it does not follow. And I want to rebuke and condemn in the strongest terms the people who are trying to bastardize the very good legacy of Professor Emmanuel Mutebire by bringing up this trivial issue. I don't know what is in the heads of Ugandans. Having a house in Kampala does not translate into wealth. It's not an indicator of wealth. In fact, the reason the economy of Uganda is stagnating is because of this cheap thinking that everybody must set up rentals, apartment. When you set up that rental or apartment, you get all the monies that would have been in the economy and you sink it in that concrete structure. It would take 100 years to get it out. In Europe and the Americas and also Eastern Asia, the economies that are booming, you will find that someone is born in an apartment building, they will live in an apartment building, their children will live in an apartment building without owning property, because they have since redeemed themselves and overcome this cheap thinking of property today. If you look at the list of the leading companies, the most richest companies in the world, none of them has a property, exists physically. Google is virtual, Amazon is virtual, Facebook is virtual, name them. So for you to start now bastardizing the good legacy of the professor because it has no property, I think let's condemn them. Now let me say this. I think those of you who have gone to Kabale, Lake Bunyonyi, I have personally gone there. On Lake Bunyonyi, and there is an island in the middle of it. That island belongs to Professor Mutebire. And on top of it, because it rises.
It has a canopy.
Yeah, it has a canopy. There he wanted to live.
Oh.
At my age, I feel burdened living in Kampala. I think this was part of those who say he didn't plan or who want to put up an indication that he did not plan well. I think he planned the best. Because what would you be doing in Kampala after 50 years old?
Already.
What would you be doing? This was his plan. We're talking about a very generous man, the man who believes in bigger things, not trivialities such as property in Kampala. We condemn the MPs that opened their mouth and wasted precious time presenting this issue on the floor of Parliament. It should be dismissed and treated with the contempt it deserves. Professor planned very well. He never wanted to stay in Kampala. The widow has not come out and say, oh, I am homeless. You see, let us talk about big things. and it's all the big things that are going to deliver this economy.
What could be the intention? What could be the intention behind this proposal?
I am sensing mafia. You see,
your suspicion.
The mafias around the president are always scheming for the next opportunity to latch on and extract money from the president or from government. This must be a work of one of the mafias. So one of those mafias now has sensed and smelling an opportunity. Now this is an opportunity to latch on. Now because if we say now, some of them we might find they have constructed premises. Now they want to find the market for sell. And we say, Mr. President, let us now buy this one for the widow whom it belongs to them. These are schemes of mafias. Let the professor be. Let his family be. Please mind national business.
Wow. I'm
very annoyed on these attempts to bastardize the good legacy of the professor.
Our viewers, our viewers,
who wants to be in Kampala with the pollution? You want him to be in Kampala here, the confusion of Kampala with the border borders. You want him, professor, to be with the border borders here?
He will be there. He will do good consulting work at his island and give.
Well,
let us talk about things that will build the country.
Well, our viewers, this is The Dialogue, and my name is Simapolo. To crown this debate and this discussion on this particular issue on a good note, I want you to pick that good decision you think the Honorable, now late Professor Mutebire, made that big decision. One, there was a decision to buy fighter jets at one point. He said, no, we cannot do this. I remember there is also a very recent decision to print money in Uganda. The professor said, no, we cannot print the money in Uganda now. Then there is, he also participated in whistleblowing on the matter of pellets, those pellets that arrived on a plane, I think from Italy. You remember that saga that eventually went to Kosase. I don't know if you can pick one. Now we leave this bad discussion behind. We move on.
The professor did very many good things. You see, his role, his centrality in developing a package in developing the dose of medicine that was injected into the economy from 1990 to 2000. I think that dose was a dose that well calculated. That was a dose that was able to trigger and stimulate, not only to trigger recovery, but also stimulate development. It's that foundation that on which Uganda is still riding to date. So that was, I think, one of the best things you can look forward to. It had its own merits and demerits, but as you know, we don't work with angels. Mistakes are too human. Now, the bad thing, I think, there were moments of laxity, and I don't know whether, as he kept aging, you know, when you age, you also lose your concentration, but also the bite. So you get to see that there are times you would say, but why would the professor allow to be, you know, what is it called, arm twisted into, you know, accepting the demands of the regime? Okay. Because you see, the regime in the last 15 days, its biggest interest has been on survival. So when the regime is fighting for survival and all its efforts are geared towards surviving, you see, they need the money, and sometimes the money is not there. So I think he should have resisted more, and of course it is all history now. Wow. Yeah, but we look at a man overall who shall be remembered as a colossus of macroeconomics.
Wow, Honorable.
This testament I can make.
That highest point, and probably the lowest.
Quickly. Like we've been discussing
in his distinguished service.
So his refusal to print money in Uganda was very important, because he knew he would be overridden by the mafiaism, and maybe he would not manage the inflation if money is printed within Uganda, because there would be easy access when money is printed in Uganda. I think he did a wise decision in that particular regard. But we have to thank the president also, who is the appointing authority, whereas he has been governor Bank of Uganda.
Yeah, we have seen incidents where he disagrees with people in charge, and then they eventually break away. But for him, President Museveni has retained him, even gave him another contract, an extension of a contract.
Yes.
At an extent.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That we have to thank the president, and I think in replacement of such a person, he should be looking at somebody who seamlessly look like him. But I like a coincidence. I saw the structured adjustment program being handled by a Kigezi person that was Manzi Mubwine by then, and we have had Dr. Suruma, Minister of Finance. Even the president talked about Dr. Suruma also having decisions like that of the foreign professor. I don't talk for the president, but somebody like Dr. Suruma would be one of the best persons to replace.
I think I agree.
Yeah, to replace the
Really?
Yes.
He's 70 something.
Whatever, but if his health is good, if his health is good,
I think 77.
Yeah, Bank of Uganda it's just ideas. It's just ideas.
Okay.
I remember Professor Suruma disagreeing with the president on the issue of minimum wage.
How old is the president?
On the issue of minimum wage. So,
in 76, I think.
Professor Suruma, I'm just trying to say, he's a man who can also disagree with the president, but the president also agrees with him. The president was very clear yesterday. He doesn't just want people who just say yes. No, bring intellectual debate.
Okay.
You bring intellectual debate. So I'm trying to say that would be the likely person. That would fall. I try to fit his steps in the steps of the fallen professor.
Wow.
But what I was trying to say is that we need a very strong person in that position, because whereas you are a governor Bank of Uganda, there is a president of Bank of Uganda.
Wow. Henry, in just
the president of this country, and through us who elect him. So that's why I was thanking the president for maintaining such an astute person in the position, and he should again get a similar person to put in such a position. Whether they are disagreeing, but he knows that that person is a patriot, and these are the principles of NRM, being patriotic. We need somebody who loves Uganda to be in the position of governor.
I will give 1 minute to Henry. Do you think the president will get trouble finding a replacement for Professor Mutebire?
You see the president now, you look at his interest. I think he's going to look at someone who is going to serve his interest. And I don't know where, if you put the two things on as a weighing scale, the two things being number one, regime survival and Uganda. I don't know which one would take the lead. The president, so the president, his biggest interest is in the regime survival. So I think he will likely pick someone that is going to serve his interests.
Well, our viewers, that's it in tribute to Professor Emmanuel Tumusiime Mutebire. We committed that time to look at his contribution, and yes, he made his contribution. He has, of course, been extolled as a patriot, a nationalist, and who have had a distinguished career in the banking sector and the whole economy of this country. We really commiserate with the family and condolences once again. We say, may his soul rest in peace. Now we need to cross over and utilize the remaining minutes on the 36 years of NRM. This week, like I said in the beginning, is NRM Victory Week. On 26 January 1986, NRM NRA captured Kampala, and on 29th January, they were on the steps of Parliament, and a big statement was made. This is not a mere change of guards, it is a fundamental change. Those were the words or from President Museveni, then the commander of the NRA, that army that had deposed the sitting government. We again think that we should look back at those 36 years. Recently, at the event, President Museveni said in just 1 year, we will be going into middle income. These are promises that have been made over time. We are yet to go to middle income. Tanzania, our neighbors, made it. And like we were saying in our discussion here, our currency is still is one of the weakest in the region. I don't know if all that can be part of this discussion. And looking at what is being done, I remember the president, even on NRM Victory Day celebrations, announced that he will be launching the parish development model, and we are lucky a legislator from Chibuku will host that event. And all that will be part of a discussion, I think, gentlemen, in the studios. I'll start with the Henry Muguzi. Can you break the ice?
Thank you very much, Apollo. 36 years. 36 odd years of the NRM regime. And of course, we don't know whether it is the NRM that came from the bush that we still have now, but or NRA, but the face is, at least the head of state is the same. The scores and misses. I'll point out, it's not my duty to point out the scores. It speaks for the party.
All right.
But I'll point out a few.
No, in the interest of time, you can point out the misses.
Let me point out a few things. The first one, they came with that 10-point program that spoke about certain things, such as democracy. And I think it was the NRM that introduces, it says, a situation where the ordinary person participates in deciding who is going to be the leader of that person. This was a new thing. Because previously, the Mayumba Kumis, the Muruka chiefs, they were appointed right from the colonial days. So I remember my father was like, is it possible that we are... And the people voted, the RCs. And the RCs were there, and they were governing them. So that people were able to participate in determining who should govern them, and even at the lowest level. I think that's a score. Wow. We can take that as a score. Number two, I think the economy. The economy was not only in shambles, but it was not there. There was no economy to talk about. Yeah, but you see the president, like I said, from up until the mid-2000s, the president never even wanted anybody involved in politics to be anywhere near Ministry of Finance. Because he wanted the technocracy to afford this, to enjoy this time, think, create, and steer the economy. So because of those efforts, of course, the economy was able to be given the impetus it has, and that we can talk about. The other thing we can talk about is the stability and peace. Wow. Up to the people are saying Tueva Kakutulo, but of course now they are saying Tulo enough is not enough. But that peace and stability, the political stability that you can know that from here I will go to where I want to go, and tomorrow I will wake up and do the same thing, and the other year. That stability, I think, is something we need to talk about. But now let me talk about the negatives, the misses.
We'll talk about the misses after.
We talk about misses after. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you talk about the you add on the scores. Yes. Me, I've stopped there.
Following my brother Mujuzi's scores, and he has put the scores on a macro level: economics, security. Thank you very much. That is a huge score. Whereas I'm not the spokesperson of NRM.
You're a party member.
I'm a party member. And I know, and it's the ruling party. NRM on micro, in regard to the social aspect, the peace and whatever, has been really infrastructure development. The road infrastructure means a lot to the nation. 3 weeks ago, I traveled to Arua and came back on on the same day through Maction Falls. I wondered, I thought that is something incredible that would not be done.
Where did the journey start?
From Kampala at 6 in the morning. And I can assure you, by 11 I was in, by 10 I was 11 I was in Pakwachi.
Wow.
And in 2 hours I was in Arua. And we came back. By 10 p.m. I was back in my house. One day. That infrastructure development, road infrastructure development, where I come from, Kibuku district. Last week with the Prime Minister, I was with the Prime Minister when we were launching 3 Tamaka roads passing through one district, Kibuku district. 3 Tamaka roads. So that infrastructure development is important. I'm not talking of the micro. The peace, security. I remember just last year, they were interviewing the leader of opposition in Tanzania. And I asked him, you criticized President Magufuli on each and everything. Is there one good thing you can mention of President Magufuli? And he said yes. Though he has killed the democracy. This man, before he became president, he was the Minister for Works. So even when he became president, he never stopped being the Minister of Works. And what he has done for Tanzania, as far as road infrastructure is concerned, in his undemocratic ways, is tremendous. The Tanzania's road infrastructure, because now he was the president, he used not to get those monies when he was the Minister for Works, he used.
I think they are even planning to launch the SGR, Standard Gauge Railway, very soon.
I can also tell
It's
you,
phenomenal, the infrastructure.
I can also tell you that the president of Uganda, de facto, is the Minister of Defense. Because he was once a Minister of Defense, he fought. That is why the security, the peace, in this, leave these other small cores you have stolen here, somebody have shot one another, but the peace, the stability is because the president we have for these 36 years, he's the de facto he's the de facto Minister of Defense, because it's what he knows well. That's why he professionalized the army. You can see the army being more appreciated than the police in the public. You can imagine. That used never to be the case. How Uganda's army stands tall in the region and the world. We are stabilizing Somalia, which had failed. It is majorly because of this army here. We've gone everywhere in the Great Lakes region. You can imagine now he has handled, now we are opening the Katuna border. You don't know the intestines of how he reached that level. 2 years, the Katuna border has been...
3 years. 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. But that tact of negotiation without being confrontation has yielded to this aspect. So there, it is a score.
Though it has other undertones.
Yeah, it has those ones, but there is a score. For us as a nation, there is a score. So that is why, for me, I don't beat about the bush. If I suppose that this thing is correct this way, the NRM has. It has also done infrastructure in health, bringing in Health Center 3 Ward with all its undertones, which we shall I can talk about on the other side when we come to the level of the criticism of the 36 years. Though I'm NRM, I have to critique.
Yeah, true.
I want something better.
We should be doing it. Our time is really running out.
We should do it. So, with all that very good infrastructure development, the security, peace, stability, the economic recovery, because a government is like a company. There was a strategic plan. That is why I said this is a fundamental change. What
you
pay. This was an embarrassment to the country. And as NRM, we must legislate. We must have a national health insurance scheme for every Ugandan. Ghana here has the Senate, Social Security and National Insurance Trust. Every Ghanaian, if he is sick, he can access free medical treatment because every Ghanaian pays annually or monthly on to the National Insurance Trust Board. This law was passed, was not assented to, because as a workers' leader, also we did not agree on some of the things the parliament had passed. By then I was not in the parliament. I'm in parliament for the first time. It's going to come back to the floor. Just like I discussed seriously on the National Social Security Act, which has been assented to, I'm very sure, with the knowledge I have, when this bill comes back to Parliament, I will put in my all to ensure that the National Health Insurance law passes. And without that, then as NRM, we are still lagging behind on the issue of protecting the
right to health.
The right to health. Education. This should be in public-private partnership. It's also a basic need. We cannot leave it just to any big and other to come and do business. When we invited the education sector, they came to the Committee of Tourism, Trade and Industry as a business. Can you imagine? Not as a service. They are failing just as a business. We cannot go into education only to do business. We should actually be looking at the service.
Honorable, quickly, let's go to a very important aspect of governance and democracy. It's very critical to all those that we are talking about. It's a conduit for those people who, the policy makers like you, who are in charge of these policies we are talking about. How has NRM fared in that line of governance, which was key in those 10-point programs?
The governance is to make sure that every 5 years there's an election.
Is that enough?
I'm giving you an example. That can't be enough. That can't be enough, because first of all, in democracy, have you allowed a free and fair election? Most of the elections are free and fair.
Can you repeat that?
Most of the elections are free and fair. What is the problem at the elections of LOC?
Even in NRM?
Yes.
Internal elections in NRM are free and fair.
Yeah, if you fear to bring out yourself, then you should not blame. If you fear to bring out yourself, you bring out yourself. You see, any ruling government wants dominance. And as NRM, they feel dominance.
Whichever way
dominance
it comes
is within President Museveni in regard to the helm of power. That's what the NRM feels.
Using whatever means possible.
Not whatever means. Have they killed anybody in order for the president to become chairman?
People died. People died in the recent elections. 54 are on record. They died.
People died in order for the president to become the chairman of the party. Nobody died.
Elections have become bloodier and bloodier every election cycle.
Which is not bloody. Every election, everywhere, people may die because of the controversies that come. I say that I'm not the NRM spokesperson, but as a legislator for NRM, I can tell you that via democracy, elections are held every 5 years. That is one. Governance, whereas there could be some failures, but the governance there is rule of law. We have all the 3 arms of government. So what is wrong with that?
Now, on that point, Honorable, let's invite NRM Guzi, because I think he must be.
For him, you think he's going to be very fair? I'm not a Muchiga. I've been a Muchiga enough.
You try to be a Muchiga enough.
I've tried to be Muchiga enough. These matters. That's why on both sides, I tell you, and I've been here always. Where do we criticize? Where do we critique?
Honorable,
we want the government to be on course.
Henry, it is your time now.
Thank you, Apollo, for giving me this time, and I hope I'll have some time.
Yeah, you'll have it.
Over the last 20 years, it is easier to speak about the things that have the misses than pick gains. Because up until the mid-2000s, there were gains there.
Enormous gains.
Yeah.
Growing.
But from that point forward, I think from the time we returned to multi-party, then things started going haywire. Now, we have, over the last 15, 20 years, the Ministry of Defense has been taking a lion's share of the national budget. The argument from the onset was, let us professionalize the army, let us professionalize the police, professionalize the security institutions. But until today, as we speak today, these security the security institutions, the police, continue to behave as if they were militias and professional. So all the money we have sent, this is why you see they go out there and kidnap citizens. How can a government in power, which controls or has leverage over all the institutions, resort to kidnapping people, its own people? Some of them have been detained. Some of them we don't know where they are. You see, this is a minus and this is a miss, because the government worth its name should use the institutions it leverages to do this work. You've had the Kakwenza thing and many other things. So today, people are saying, okay, if Kakwenza is being charged like that, if Kaihura is doing this, if the other one is done that, what about me? So the fear is beginning to come back. But that's not a while. Let us move to something else. Let us move to something, democracy he talked about. Democracy, you will recall that we started these elections even when we were still in the bush. They were still in the bush.
LOC.
The RC elections. So elections were always an integral part of the NRM way of work. So elections are not anything new. We had elections in 1993, 96, but you see the developed North kept telling Mr. Museveni that, you see, elections do not constitute democracy. Democracy means there are certain things that must be in place, such as political parties. There must be fair competition. There must be freedom of assembly, freedoms of speech, freedom of media. The citizens should be, the political parties, once they have been allowed to come back and exist, they should be allowed space to go to the citizenry and sell their manifestos, sell their ideology. Today, if you look around, when the NRM came to power, all the regions, I'm sure even his region, you would find something called, you would find physical spaces called bomber grounds. They were bomber grounds. Today you go and check across the country. At every bomber ground, you will find a huge machine. It looks like a mamba. We don't understand what it is. It looks like these one things which throw tear gas, and there is deployment. So the physical spaces that citizens used to use outside of the capital to assemble have been removed. In Kampala, the Constitutional Square, formerly State Square, is a no-go place. Can you go and assemble? We used to convene there. We can. Centenary Park. So the removal of physical spaces is denying citizens the right to assemble. When the people cannot assemble, they cannot be able to speak about things that affect them and agree on a way forward. So that's a minus. Elections, the securitization and militarization of elections. When we are going through an election in Uganda, the kind of deployment will make someone believe we are going for military war. So the thinking is that whenever we are going for elections, I think the regime for it prepares for a military expedition. So you cannot have democracy in such a thing. Now, the independence of the commission, it's not clear how the electoral commission is constituted. People have proposed reforms. The reforms cannot be even listened to, because the current status quo benefits the regime. Let me go to economics.
Let me
go to the economy.
You have only 2 minutes.
Let me go to the economy. The privatization, the corruption that has bedeviled all development, the creation of the mafia, the people who do what they want when they want. They wield so much power. State institutions have been dysfunctionalized. They cannot function, because in state institutions you'll find there is one system that looks formal and there's an informal system which is manned by mafias. The informal system has more power. You are the head of the institution, but your junior has more power. Institutions cannot work. What is working is Mr. Museveni alone. He's the everything. He's the institutional framework. He's the decision maker here. He does everything. He even determines who takes which contract. Haven't you seen him saying, let this contract go to so and so? This thing, this level of micromanagement is not what democracy presupposes. This is a negative. Let's go to the education sector. Before the NRM came, there were schools that the colonialists had created to produce leaders, because you see, leadership is intentional. The leaders don't just drop like manna. So you have to groom them. So they had established schools like Mwiri, Bulldog,
King's College,
School, King's College, guys, and so on. Every region had them to groom leaders intentionally.
College.
Today, they are not. You go to Mwiri, Busoga College Mwiri today, and see whether it is able to produce leaders. So these things are kind of intended to make sure that Uganda is starved of future leaders. No wonder today we have a problem of scarcity of leaders. Political parties don't have leaders. They just have businessmen. The institutions do not have leaders. Homes do not have leaders. Even churches have, let me tell you, we have a leadership crisis, but it goes back. So for a nation that wants to take people to the middle income country, including you're saying in the next year, 1 year, we're going to be middle income status. Are you investing in your people? You see, merely investing in infrastructure is not enough. You must invest in your people, because it's investing in the people that will deliver a country into quite a number of things.
NRM Muguzi, your parting shot should address whether you see a deliberate attempt to reverse and revert to what is actually what we aspire as a country. Do you see that attempt?
I don't see it. Let me tell you, we need resources as a country to go to middle income country. But you see, if you do one thing, for example, we were told last time that through corruption, we are losing over 10 trillion through corruption. So if you said, look, now let me fight corruption, you will save 10 trillion just there. And then you invest this in the people. So I think we are not seeing enough. We are seeing people that are trying to be seen to be doing something without actually doing anything about things.
Good.
So I think this government has to start doing things.
Going forward in just 1 minute, because you're concluding.
Yeah, in fact, I could pick on that in the two. In fact, I think we took more time on the legacy of Professor. And yet this one is going forward.
We have time. We have time. We'll come back.
We shall come back on this. Is that even the professor died when we were just going to launch the parish development model, which again the government thinks is one of the things that is going to lead us into the middle income. But it's a start. It's a start. So it is an area we need to look at and see whether that can deliver us. But importantly is if we have not fought corruption, being a member of parliament and sitting on committees, when you look at these agencies and you see what could be happening around the agencies, you really wonder that fighting corruption is paramount if we are to move to the middle income. He alluded, and I want to allude to the fact that
in your final remark,
yes, what saw the government, the 36 years of NRM stagger was the introduction of the multi-party system. Whereas the powers that be that were putting pressure on the government, I think the movement system, that's when you hear of the MPs who could, because they would speak a free mind. It's not like...
But multipartyism has worked in other countries. In Kenya, Tanzania, and everywhere there.
They were saying that we are not yet mature enough into multi-party. That's why, as if the country, from the time we started the multi-party, it was again just beginning.
Honorable, we conclude.
Remember when the members of parliament could discuss and everybody thinks, somebody may think that there are no astute members of parliament currently because you have 2 minutes, you have 3 minutes to discuss something, and sometimes if you have had a caucus, then you have to toe that line.
Yeah.
So a multi-party democracy, in fact, is a dictatorship.
Okay.
The movement system would be better.
We must go out, Honorable.
That's why he has said that even the leaders of some of these parties are businessmen. They're just exchanging things here. There is nothing much.
Okay. Thank you so much, our viewers, and thank you so much for your time. I must thank my guests, Honorable. I think you've opened a door for another big debate. And let me hope we will not see you soon presenting a motion to revert back to movement system and we run away from, as if it is the, only, the key problem. Thank you so much, Henry, for your time. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure for hosting us.
Good. My name is Simapolo, and
Bye-bye.
the dialogue will be back next Saturday. We can only say for God and our country. Good afternoon.